2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports filed for a new preliminary injunction to make sure NASCAR can't take their charters on Wednesday. If NASCAR does take their charters, though, who could possibly be in line to buy them? And where does this leave Tyler Reddick in all of this mess? Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. On Monday, NASCAR rolled on once again because 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports filed for a new preliminary injunction with District Court. So if you remember back a couple of days, weeks at this point, the Fourth Circuit of Appeals overturned the original preliminary injunction, which allowed NASCAR to rescind the charters, basically take over possession of 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports charters, 6 charters, 3 apiece from each team. They'll be able to do that on Wednesday. Well, the teams absolutely do not want that to happen because, well, there's a lot of money that comes along with having a charter, so they would love to keep their charter status while continuing their lawsuit against NASCAR. NASCAR, of course, is like, hey, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We're going to take these charters back. On Monday, the teams filed for a preliminary injunction and a temporary restraining order to stop NASCAR from being able to do that. The courts have given NASCAR until 5 p.m. on Wednesday to respond. I would expect a judge's decision on Thursday or Friday. If not, those teams are going to have to race at Dover this weekend without a charter, which the guaranteed starting spot aspect of it isn't really going to be an issue because there's not going to be more than 40 cars that show up. At the same time, though, they're not going to be earning as much money at all. Part of this, though, is also that the teams, NASCAR may ask the teams to pay back the first 20 races of the season in terms of the chartered money that they've earned. And the teams also don't want to do that either because it's a substantial amount of cash. At the same time, though, NASCAR wants them to pay that back so they can redistribute it to the teams that have signed the charter agreement as well. So how do we even get here? Well, the original preliminary injunction was granted to the teams because on the basis of the no sue clause. Like in the charter agreement, there was a clause that said that the teams could not sue NASCAR. The court said that, hey, yeah, that is an antitrust violation. Here's your temporary, your restraining order. Here's your preliminary injunction. You can continue to race as charter teams, receive the same benefits, but you don't have to sign the charter agreement. NASCAR wasn't happy about that at all, and it took all the way up until a couple weeks ago for that to get overturned. Now, the teams, part of this reason they want this preliminary injunction is because if they lose their charters, that is also going to affect sponsorship and their driver contracts as well, on top of the fact that they're going to, 1, earn less money, and 2, not have a guaranteed starting spot in the field any longer. So on Wednesday, NASCAR will be able to take back possession of those charters, and the teams are scared about that because if they do, well, they know they're going to face a financial shortfall and financial hardships will be very much right in front of them. Not so much for 2311 Racing, but Front Row Motorsports definitely is not going to want to lose those charters and all the additional money that comes along with it. At the same time, the teams indicated in their court filing that they are very concerned that NASCAR is going to attempt to sell their charters as well as soon as they take back possession of them. And there's some validity to that for sure. And we'll get to that in the next segment about who could possibly be in line to buy one of those charters and what could happen here. But if NASCAR does sell those charters, well, those teams are SOL, as people like to say. They're going to have to go to that trial date in December. And it's like, what are we even fighting for at this point? Because we've lost our charters. Now, we did learn, though, through NASCAR's statement that they released that they have sat down, or at least have offered to sit down with the two teams to try to find a settlement, but the teams have not responded to their request. NASCAR, in their statement, says, quote, "It is unfortunate that instead of respecting the clear rulings of the Fourth Circuit, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are now burdening the district court with a third motion for another unnecessary and inappropriate preliminary injunction. As both the Fourth Circuit and district court suggested, NASCAR has made multiple requests to 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports to present a proposal to resolve this litigation. We have yet to receive a proposal from 2311 or Front Row, as they have instead preferred to continue their damaging and distracting lawsuit. We will defend NASCAR's integrity from the baseless lawsuit forced upon the sport that threatens to divide the stakeholders committed to serving race fans everywhere. Remain focused on collaborating with the 13 teams that signed the 2025 charter agreement and share our mutual goal of delivering the best racing in the world each week, including this weekend in Dover." So NASCAR seemingly not happy about this because they're like, hey, listen, we've done the song and dance. We've done this how many times? It's just like Groundhog Day. We're just going to keep reliving this over and over and over again. Well, the teams say that they have found new information that will support their new request for a preliminary injunction, and they found that during the discovery period. The teams, through their lawyer Jeffrey Kessler, said, quote, "Today we filed a motion in district court for a renewed preliminary injunction and temporary restraining order to protect the team's ability to race chartered for the remainder of the 2025 Cup Series season and prevent irreparable business harm to 2311 and FRM Motorsports until we can present our case at trial in December. New information surfaced during the discovery process that overwhelmingly supports our position that a preliminary injunction is legally warranted and necessary. The team's love of stock car racing and belief in a better future for the sport for all parties, teams, drivers, employees, sponsors, and fans continues to motivate their efforts to pursue this antitrust case." So based on that statement, it sounds like the teams have no interest in a settlement with NASCAR, and they very much want to go to trial in December as they continue, their pursuit to break up the monopoly that they view as NASCAR. And hey, maybe you can read into this two different ways. One, NASCAR is trying to be like, all right, we'll sit down and play the game and see if you guys want to come to a settlement here and, avoid all of this going forward. And you guys can just accept our terms and move forward, because I doubt NASCAR is really willing to make any sort of major concessions for 2311 Racing and for Motorsports. Then, of course, there's going to be the people that are like, hey, NASCAR is offering for a settlement because they don't want to go to trial in December because they are concerned about potentially having to sell off their ISC, International Speedway Corporation track holdings, company, or they'll have to sell off ARCO or something along those lines. I don't necessarily think that that's the direction that they're going. Very well could be, but I think that it's more of a, hey, we're tired of dealing with this at this point. Why don't you guys just go ahead and accept the terms that, they have laid out in front of them? The teams, meanwhile, absolutely want to continue this on because, well, it's one of those things that's starting to feel like once you're so far down the path, you can't be like, all right, we got to turn back and go now. Well, the teams now are seemingly can't turn back. They're like, we're in this. We're committed. We don't know a way out at any point, and we're going to have to just continue to go ahead and trudge forward with it and see what happens on the other side. For now, for everyone else, it's just another storyline that continues to roll on, and I guess we'll wait until 5 p.m. on Wednesday to see what NASCAR's response is and ultimately what a judge decides, and see if NASCAR does take back possession of those charters. If NASCAR does take back possession of those charters, where and who could they possibly go to? If NASCAR does now have 6 charters that they will be able to basically repossess from 2311 Racing and from Motorsports, they now have 6 charters that they can put up for sale. Put a stake out in front of One Daytona for sale. Charters, contact NASCAR. And listen, there's going to be people lined up for them. There's definitely going to be teams lined up for them. I mean, heck, Legacy Motor Club is trying to buy one from Rick Ware Racing. They're in court on Monday afternoon as they try to figure out that entire mess. They could just be like, all right, screw it. We're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and buy this one, which still could get tied up in the court system. Legacy Motor Club just addicted to trying to buy charters that get tied up in litigation. But from a team standpoint, obviously Legacy Motor Club, we know, is looking to expand to a third car. RFK, Roush Keselowski Racing, they're currently leasing a charter from Rick Ware Racing, and that part of the whole Legacy Motor Club debacle that's happening over there. They could just want to buy one outright, so they don't have to worry about that going forward. They could just have 3 charters available and not have to think about it anymore. Richard Childress Racing has reportedly, at least last year, kind of kicked the tires on buying a third charter and trying to become a 3 charter team. All right, so there's possibly 3 of them right there. The new owner, TJ Pusher of Rick Ware Racing, he said he wants to be a 3-car team by 2027. All right, well, here's 2 more. If you're interested, if they end up losing that one charter. If not, there's another charter for you to be able to buy. All right, there's 4 out of the 6. Who else is going to be involved in this? Maybe somebody outside the sport. Maybe somebody else wants to buy 2. Hayek Motorsports. Hey, you guys interested in, becoming a 2-car team? Here's a scenario that I would be really interested to see if it happened. The Wood Brothers. They're a 1-car team. They are technically part of Team Penske, and Penske operates as a 4-car operation. 3 of those charters owned by Penske. 1 of those charters owned by the Wood Brothers. There's nothing to stop the Wood Brothers from buying a second charter. That now becomes a 5-car team. Kind of like the Hendrick Spire sort of 7-car conglomerate that we see sort of happening over there. Maybe that's what you see happen on the Ford side of things. Maybe there's somebody outside the sport that wants to get involved. All the Dale Jr. fans are absolutely going to be like, Dale's time to buy right here. Maybe, but I don't think NASCAR is going to set the charter price in the basement. Like, it's not going to be $5 million. They, of course, can control the charter price. They can control the entire charter market right here with 6 charters and the future of what that price point's going to be. Keep in mind, they still have 13 other teams that signed the charter agreement that all own charters that do not want to see that charter price get driven down because NASCAR has 6 of them over here, and NASCAR could seemingly, dictate what the market price is for one going forward. I would imagine they'll be around what recent transactions have been for charters, if they were in fact to sell them. But they're not going to be short on a list of suitors for this. Absolutely not. It is going to be a bit of a feeding frenzy out there, because when else are you going to have 6 charters that come available? Last year, you had 4 with Stewart Haas Racing, and obviously 3 of them sold, and then the Haas factory team held on to 1. Maybe they want to get back into the game. Maybe they want to get a second one. I doubt it. I highly doubt that they would want to do that. But there's options out there for sure. Cog Racing, hey, you could become a 3-charter team if you're really that interested. Or, like I said, somebody on the outside comes in and buys up a couple of them, starts up a cup team, and wants to see where it can go, because people are really high on what the future price of a charter could be. This is like the NFL just taking possession of a franchise and being like, all right, we're going to go ahead and sell it to somebody else here. And the other people are sitting back being like, oh my God. I think one of the crazier things about this, though, is NASCAR could seemingly sell them back to 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. A little bit of a double jeopardy. Stab them in the back. Hey, pay for these again after you've already paid for them. That would be certainly something. But they're not going to be short on a list of people willing to buy those charters if they do take those back from the teams. I think one of the last big remaining questions through all of this, though, is if the teams don't get the preliminary injunction, if NASCAR does take those charters away, what happens to Tyler Reddick and the rest of the drivers at FRM and 2311 Racing? Because as we learned last year, the teams, part of the reason they wanted that preliminary injunction is because in Tyler Reddick's contract, it says that he must be in a chartered car. Well, if there's no charters anymore, that would essentially void his contract and make him a free agent. So where could he possibly end up at in 2026? Tyler Reddick is a guy that teams will absolutely make space for. Teams will face a hard decision. Teams will pay a driver in the last year of their contract in 2026 to not race for that team anymore, or they'll find a place to put them. And there's a lot of drivers that will be in contract years in 2026. We've talked about that over the last few weeks, about how silly season next year is going to be a lot crazier than what it is this year, which there could be some things happening behind the scenes that would spark up silly season outside of this situation here. But I think that there's been some rumblings. We'll have to wait for a little bit more information to come out about it. In terms of this, though, Tyler Reddick is going to be extremely sought after. And he's a guy that could get hired and kind of change the plans of some teams going forward. I mean, when you think about it, basically every big team has a driver in a contract year in 2026. Hendrick Motorsports has 2 of them, Kyle Larson and Alex Bowman. Team Penske has at least 1 of them in Austin Cindric. And there's rides there. And Tyler Reddick is a guy deserving of being in a top tier ride for sure. At the same time, we know Trackhouse has an open ride. We have an idea, pretty safe assumption of who's going to take that over. But Tyler Reddick throws a big wrench into things. Not that I think that he's going to Trackhouse. I'm just throwing out rides that we know could potentially be open, in 2027, or at least have drivers entering into contract years. He's never going back to RCR, but they have 2 of them by the sounds of it, based on the team chart. So there are going to be teams that are going to seek out Tyler Reddick if he, in fact, it does become a free agent. I don't think he's going to end up in a situation like Clint Boyer where he has to go run a year at like a backmarker team before he can move up to a big team. I think that he's a guy that teams will absolutely put into a car and be like, hey, listen, other driver, we appreciate it, but here's your check. Go do the Corey LaJoie, sit on the sidelines. We're going to put this guy in the car here, which I wouldn't say has necessarily worked out supremely well for Spire this year, but who knows? I guess maybe things can always change over there for good or better, depending on what direction Justin Haley's performance continues to go. But from the Tyler Reddick standpoint, I don't think that he should be as worried as maybe some of the other drivers, like Zane Smith, Todd Gilliland, Noah Gragson, all incredibly talented. All guys I think are eventual Cup Series winners with the right situation, the right team, and everything like that. But when you look at it from a standpoint of next year, things become a little bit cloudy if this does in fact happen. Bubba Wallace, he attracts sponsors. At the same time, though, he lacks that consistency over the summer. He hasn't won in nearly 3 years now, and it becomes an issue. Riley Herbst, of course, brings family money with him, and he could find a ride if he really wanted to. But yeah, things become a lot more murky and a lot more questionable for a lot of those guys if they do, in fact, lose their charters. And the teams certainly don't want to have that happen. So let me know in the comments what you think about the teams filing for a new preliminary injunction. Who do you think would buy the charters if NASCAR does, in fact, take those 6 charters over and, puts them on the open market? And, where do you think Tyler Reddick could end up at? I'm not saying he's going anywhere, but potentially could end up at if the teams don't have a charter for him next season. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.